This is the breakdown of Paper, a poem by me, one of the smartest, honest pieces of gender-based violence you'll ever hear. I'm so grateful I was able to write this poem because I remember writing it and putting it up, online and things like that. And one of the first people to comment was a friend of mine and was like, yo, dude, this poem is so dark. And I remember explaining it to him like for like 5 or 10 minutes, explaining to him, the concept and how it came about, and afterwards I was like, okay. And in that moment, it just clicked, like just how oblivious we are as men, not only of the privilege of being a man, but like just about like how wrong some of our behavior is towards women and how we treat women. We almost feel like we're entitled to certain behavior to get away with certain things. And I feel like this piece is so powerful because it speaks exactly to that. Just the entitlement that us as men have over women when it comes to women. But yeah, let's get to it. I was 8 years old and my uncle told me that women were just like paper. I was probably younger than 8 years old when I first kind of saw the abuse that my aunt was suffering at the hands of my uncle. But I was probably, I think, around 8 years old when I could really see that, nah, this is not something that is nice. Um, and, even how the poem comes about, it says, I was 8 years old, my uncle taught me that women were just like paper. Like, he never really verbally, of course, taught me, this is how to treat women. But, through how he behaved, about how nonchalant he was about it, because I remember he used to do a lot of crazy things, wrong things, and really horrible things to my aunt. But, he used to do it like in broad daylight, man, like in the middle of the yard where neighbors could, anybody was walking past would see and could see what was happening. Um, and, the way that people just, turned a blind eye to it, the way that he really didn't care about it, the way that even my aunt wouldn't make a fuss about it, it kind of made it seem like that type of behavior was okay. So as a child who's trying to formulate, a moral compass and try to understand life, when you see something that bad, not being punished for it, you start thinking, oh, maybe it's not that bad. And I think that's kind of like how a lot of men, boys as well, kind of like fall into this trap of just thinking it's supposed to be like this, but in reality it's really not. um and when I say, women are just like paper, if you think about just like how soft and how easy, paper is, you can really do whatever you want with paper. And when you scramble it up, it becomes rubbish. And he was really just doing whatever he wanted with my aunt, and he was getting away with it, and was really not treating her the way you're supposed to treat your wife, your queen, the person that you say is you love. You're not supposed to treat them like rubbish. That if you hold them by the corners of their shoulders, then you can bend their will and fold them. That their beauty was up to the hands of the beholder. No matter the clay, if you beat it hard enough, then you can mold it to any shape. First of all, my aunt, beautiful, beautiful woman, amazing spirit, amazing soul. Um, but unfortunately, like most relationships, when men feel insecure because of their fragile ego or because of the mismanagement of the ego, um, they end up manipulating and even abusing women in order to make women feel smaller than they are, as a way of empowering themselves, which is horrific. And like, that's just speaking about just like how hard my uncle really worked and pushed to take this precious woman who was supposed to be valuable to him, his wife. He worked really hard to make her feel less valuable, less worthy, less smart, less intelligent. And he did that by abusing her. And if you think about it, that's the worst thing you could do to somebody, especially in that context of relationship, of marriage, because we are all, I believe, we get into relationships because the other person empowers you, the other person wants what's best for you, and because of that, you want to have them closer to you. And that just goes for friendship, but definitely as well for romantic relationships as well, especially, in marriage. And, the fact that somebody that she valued was telling her constantly that she's not valuable, constantly that she's not worthy, broke her down, and because of that, he was able to overpower her through the abuse. And yeah, my uncle was a master of origami. He always had his way. Of course, in the context of the poem, my uncle being a master of origami speaks about how he was, constantly manipulating my aunt through abuse. But in this context, it also goes to speak about how he was able to get away with, the abuse. He was able to speak himself out of such tight situations. Able to say, no, man, this woman, I suspect she's cheating on me, or this woman is not doing things, the way that she's supposed to do them culturally or traditionally. And he will always manipulate himself, find a way of getting himself out of, getting into trouble. And that's kind of like, he's a master of origami. He was always able to have his way. I was 14 years old when my aunt passed away. Doctors said she was battered and bruised and bent out of shape. My uncle folded her into a paper plane that could never come back home again. I remember in primary, as boys, we played a lot of games, but one of the most competitive games, of course, was racing on paper planes. And it took a lot of skill, a lot of intelligence, understanding the aerodynamics and all of those things, in order for your plane to come first, and go the furthest. And I think, just applying that scenario to, the abuse that my aunt was experiencing in the hands of my uncle, firstly, there's no okay point of abuse. Abuse is just already wrong and horrific from the word go. But he took it to the furthest, point where, unfortunately, my aunt never, came back home again. And I feel like this speaks, of course, it speaks to the males, but also to the females as well, that like, don't wait. A lot of things happen in relationships, but like abuse is one thing that like no one should tolerate. No one, you shouldn't wait for next time. You shouldn't wait for things to get better. If somebody shows you that side of themselves, for me, like it's game over, because you don't know next time, it could be worse. It usually is worse, so I just feel like abuse should not be tolerated at all, no matter what, and no matter what the circumstance, in a relationship. And as much as I could have said many things, but I feel like me saying that my aunt never came back home again, it doesn't only signify like a physical death, but it can also speak about like a mental and emotional death, where you're never the same person again, because abuse traumatizes you. It diminishes you in so many levels that like you may physically still be alive, but you're no longer the you that you initially were before the abuse. You're no longer passionate about certain things. You're no longer able to express and verbalize who you are, because now you no longer feel like those things are valuable, or you no longer feel like you're worthy, and because of that, you can never come back home. You can never be you again because of that abuse. For me, mostly, I would really like, if it is possible, just to shout this poem or have this conversation with as many men as possible, because we really need to educate ourselves on what's real, and just like the poem sheds light to the fact that we have been indoctrinated incorrectly by our leaders, by our fathers, and that's something that really has to change.